vital living health questions. We're going to pose your questions and then some others to the panelists and let them answer. And feel free, this is just a shared dialogue to make sure that we look at how do we go forward with this. So what's next if you think about vital living? What do you foresee in the future from your individual, your professional perspectives? So David, where do you see vital living going?
Well, no preparation. I think we have to have a lot more work around dementia. We were just talking about person-centered care and dementia. And 60% of our population, the OnLok population, has some level of dementia. So that's just a really, really hard one that I think we need to talk about more. So.
Yeah, my thought was on dementia as well. That is one area for the sisters that's still not covered by any of the programs or things. I mean, we can help them and support them to a degree, but if they get to a point where it's not safe for them to stay in an apartment because, you know, now we already have one who has 24/7 aides because she can't be left alone. But if she's physically healthy, but if she were to get physically sick, that would be a challenge, but it would kill her at this point to go to a locked facility. And she certainly is not qualified for any skilled facility because she doesn't need other help.
I really think that there's some great innovative models across the country of housing with services. That's really what we've been talking about today, is housing with services, but we're all trying to make it work. But I think that there's other models that we can look at, some financial models that fit that kind of living, and so I think that if we talk about the future, I think we're going to see more and more living, affordable housing, possibly, or even moderate living with meaningful services.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, it's been mentioned already today, but I think that, you know, looking to Europe, looking to our partners in Australia, you know, that they have started to chip away at these models for dementia, which is an incredibly complex way of, you know, addressing services. But I think what I see out there is that there's hope. There is a lot of work being done in this area and a lot of things that we can learn from each other around.
David, you have a lot of, that's okay. You have a lot of PACE participants who have some kind of dementia and are out in the community. How do you resource them?
So let me go back 20, 30, 40 years. The word safe always worries me, because what we did to people who we thought needed to be in nursing homes, we did it because we said they needed to be safe. Now, I don't want to take away, there are people who really, they're not safe. I would say the University of California at San Francisco is doing a whole study on people with dementia who live by themselves, and most of them in pretty kind of sketchy, I talked about the Tenderloin and areas like that. We just provide as much in-home care as we possibly can. There are times when you walk out of a person's apartment knowing that they're going to be alone for however many hours until the driver comes in the morning, and you know, you hope God's around paying attention, because there's not much more you can do.
Right, in the continuing care community settings, because it's run by, you know, a health system, they have rules about what can be safe. I mean, they will disconnect appliances, the stove, you know, and microwaves, anything like that, if people aren't safe to use them. But if they can't be sure that you're going to stay in the building, stay on the property, and be reasonably safe, they will not keep you. So we have to live within the rules of where we live, too.
So, Val, you talked about housing. Can you talk as a service provider, the benefit of having people in proximity to one another to provide services, what those benefits are versus scattered all over in a greater area?
Well, I think it's better when we're, from a service provider perspective, when we're serving people, we'll take the gray nuns out of the equation. When we're serving people in affordable housing or in other apartment buildings on the main line, we're able to have an aide there who can give micro segments of care. You know how you'll call a home health aide and they say, I'm sorry, 4 hours minimum or 2 hours minimum. That's hard to do, but when you're in a congregate living environment, you can do a half hour here, you can check on somebody for 15 minutes, go back downstairs. Providing services that way is so efficient, and it takes a great deal of effort to coordinate, but it can be done. And I love those little micro segments because people then feel like they're not alone. You don't need to sit there for 4 hours to make people feel not alone. You could be there for 20 minutes and do something, make the bed, strip the bed, move on to something else. Help with a shower tomorrow, but those micro segments make it possible.
So what, I'll pose this to all of you, what do you see as the inspiration to move from a care model and medical focus to vital living?
Well, I think one of the things that is incredibly exciting is the science of positive psychology. So one of the things that we know is that as people are happy, satisfied, and engaged in meaningful, purposeful life, and I think it was mentioned that, from this community's perspective, obviously your long-lived nature is due in part to what we're learning now in positive psychology, that what's good for the soul is good for the body, is good for the mind. Prevention of dementia symptoms, prevention of physical impairment, prevention of emotional problems, those types of things. So I think that that is one thing that is incredibly exciting, that we're starting to see science come together, understanding that as we advance vital living, we're also advancing physical, emotional, social, functional health.
Can you believe I get to work with her? Like, she's so smart.
Got anything you want to say?
No.
I think changing from the medical model to a person-centered model is a slow process, and I think a lot of our health system isn't close to it yet. Love hearing David talk about how they stand on their heads to do that, but there's a great deal of efficiency to the medical model that helps the caregivers organize their work, but it's not that great for the receivers of care, and it's not worked around what they need and when they need it. So it's, I think that challenge is still got a long ways to go. And I think until they reform the health care and insurance factor, it's really hard to make a change too.
So this is going to be really off, but I'll do it anyway. When my grandfather was in the nursing home, I used to visit him, as often as I could, and I would bring Irish whiskey. I'm sure the nursing home would have been, but I'm trying to make a point here. Here he was sort of locked away, and he couldn't even have a drink. And when you talk about the quality of life, now maybe drinking is not the quality of life everybody wants, but it was a very simple thing. He didn't want to get crazy or anything, but just something so simple as that just made the quality of life for him just a little bit better. So
I'll pose this. Val, you could start, maybe David, you can comment. But given that, and we continue to see the number of nursing home beds be reduced, where do you see the future of nursing homes in 5 and 10 years?
This is a very active discussion that we're having at the Abramson Center. And I think you may see, for those of you going to Leading Age, you're going to see it there too. We can expect nursing home beds to really significantly decrease, and it will be really reserved for the frailest, the sickest, and really it will be a place to go at the end of life. it's not a place where somebody's going to take a walker and walk down and pick up their newspaper from the front desk like it used to be. Or maybe for some it still is. That just is not, it's not going to be the place for them. And that's why I think we're seeing this this surge of housing with services. And, you know, we did a market study not long ago, and assisted living beds are overbedded in Pennsylvania, assisted living. And I think that resources are being spent at alternative places, assisted living, independent living, at big CCRCs. Even the CCRCs are seeing an erosion of occupancy. And so we're going to see more and more services being available in the home, whether that's affordable housing or in existing homes.
Yeah, we have a problem. We tried to place someone last week in a custodial bed in San Francisco. Couldn't. We called 60 facilities in, and this wasn't a difficult person to place. It was a man, which always makes it a little more difficult. But we called 60 facilities and still haven't figured out a placement for this person. So it's not a business that works anymore financially. If you're doing skilled nursing, you can make it work because you're getting Medicare payments. But custodial nursing is in California, it just doesn't pencil out. So I have no answer. The amount of people coming online as I look around this room and at myself, who may need some type of facility like that, is just going to so outnumber the beds that exist. It's a huge problem. So.
Mission. How can we best nurture our passion for mission and our belief that we are all on mission our whole life, even as we have fragility and vulnerability?
Well, I would say that certainly the Grey Nuns and other religious that I work with are challenged by that. I mean, it is a challenge to rethink your sense of mission, so that mission is not just that I'm actively running around and doing things for people, and just being present to people, and the value of interacting and sharing stories and just being part of the social structure for other people is a huge piece of mission that I think is something that can be worked on. And the idea for Americans, I think in general, that you're not working is just nobody wants to say they don't work. So I'm retired, but I work, and so it's one of those things that's un-American to say. So we have to, I think the whole country, we need to think about more what's the value of being a person who still has a good contribution to make to the rest of society.
When our sisters went to a nursing home, the administrator said to me shortly after they got there, I noticed that your sisters are talking to the patients, the residents, that nobody else wants to talk to. So that's the sense of ministry.
Yes, certainly we have found that, and I'm sure others have found that. We get a lot of feedback every place where our sisters live, that it has changed the atmosphere, and that the sisters talk to everybody, and they walk around and say hello, and it just changes the whole atmosphere, because even people who were not exceptionally friendly or always nice in what they had to say suddenly are a little bit more careful because they don't want the sisters to think badly of them. So it changes the atmosphere.
There's a question. Going back a quick minute, can you define what you mean by custodial nursing care? I haven't heard that phrase before.
Yeah, to me, there's two kinds of nursing. There's when you get out of the hospital and need what I call skilled, you need rehab and wound care and things like that. That's paid by Medicare, and it's paid way, way higher. Custodial is you're going into a nursing facility and you're going to live there for the rest of your life, and that's a Medicaid funded thing.
But we're still seeing Medicare nursing home admissions decrease nationally. even on the Medicare side, the post-acute, I would say, I think it was 3 years ago at the Catholic Leaders Symposium, when the health system said our goal is to skip the SNF, skip the nursing home, is in a number of states that nursing homes, nonprofit nursing homes, where that was their source of revenue, was post-acute rehab, is they're seeing their number of days decrease, and some of the health systems which are just saying, we're not going to discharge. Some of them don't even discharge to their own nursing homes. So that pressure of, I think in New York there was somebody who did a whole brand new beautiful rehab center, and they aren't getting the discharges to even make it work. Val, do you have any insight on that?
Yes, I've been in long-term care. Before I came to Abramson, I was at a for-profit company for 15 years. And they used to say about their Medicare admissions, their rehab admissions, stay a little longer, get a little stronger. Yeah, how about that? And to extend the Medicare stay. It wouldn't be unusual to have Medicare stay of 30 days, 45 days. You had 100, so why not? But now, the average length of stay is down to, they encourage you to stay under 14 days. So in one of our places that we have a hospital SNF, 10 days, the average length of stay. Our average length of stay on our Abramson campus is 16 days. So when you bring that rehab stay down that short, you don't need as many beds. And
The other thing I'm seeing is a lot of our sisters, the doctors will not send them to rehab because they say the chances of infection are greater. So they're getting 0 days. They may do some outpatient PT, but rehab is 0 in a number of the states.
exactly. For orthopedic procedures, how many times? Hips and knees, you go home. Yeah.
So, question, Kimberly, in your research, you had talked about the sisters on the medical, wanting to keep their doctors or medical advisors. And David, obviously, you deal with this all the time in PACE because they have to switch. And, I think congregational leaders a lot of times see that real affinity and relationship with their doctors, but the doctors may have aged in place with the sisters, or they have a unique, maybe not quite total professional relationship, and because they like them doesn't necessarily mean the best, highest care. So from the survey, if you could talk about your insights on that, and then David, I think from the benefits of as they change.
Yeah. So, certainly that particular item is very highly valued, not only within the Grey Nuns, but we see that across the samples that we do the survey with. So people like to stay with the doctor that they know or the nurse practitioner that they know. And the clinical task of trying to honor that is a tricky one, and I'll let you talk to how that's actually done. But I think broadly speaking, this idea of we can't always get what we want is a pervasive theme whenever you talk about individualized care. But I think the learning that we have had is that with a little bit of creativity, with a little bit of open discussion, listening, conversation, so what is it that you really like about your doctor or your nurse that you're with? What is it that you're really looking for from a medical professional, and trying to help guide that process with deep listening is one of the issues that we really say, now that we know what your preference is, now what are we going to do about it? That is the next step. But then how that works in the clinical environment is probably a little different.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to my doctor a little while back and I had something, I don't know what it was. And before I left, I said I had a second thing. And she said, oh, you got to make a second visit for that. Because I was past my 10 minutes. Our doctors will spend half an hour with a person. First of all, it takes a very elderly, frail person just getting their clothes on and off and things like that. Takes gentleness and time. But I will say that we honor continuity of care. Someone comes to us with ongoing conditions that their doctor is very focused on, and we think it'd be much better to respect continuity of care, we will do that. Now, we usually try to keep that to, within a year. We think within a year, while they'll continue to see our doctors as well, that they'll form some affinity with them. The other is our doctors they just see frail people. So their ability to work with chronic health conditions is just incredible. So I think that's important. The other is we're really focused on keeping people out of hospitals. When you say someone goes in the hospital, with us, often it's not going to skilled nursing. They're going back home, and we send staff out to their home, and we bring them in, and they get PT and OT and stuff. So it's a much better. I think it's a much better way of doing business. So.
And Julia, your sisters changed. Some of them changed doctors, right?
Right. When we first moved, we moved probably, I would say, about 12 miles from Mother House to where most of the sisters live now. Quite a few, of course, didn't want to change their doctors. The ones who came from way out of town, of course, they had to change their doctors. But the ones who were here, we basically didn't tell them they had to change their doctors, but we gave them the options of who the doctors nearby were. There's transportation provided for the ones who live in the CCRC. They can get to the doctors by the bus of the facility within a 5-mile radius to any doctor in that vicinity, but not 12 miles out. So the ones who could drive or could get somebody to drive them went back to their doctors. The ones who can still drive some are still going back to doctors and things. Many who couldn't drive anymore and who couldn't talk their friends into taking them anymore have switched doctors. So it's happening, but it's not instant. We have our nurse over here who coordinates with all of our sisters, and she has a lot to do with helping them make those changes. So she gets to talk to all of them about that.
So speaking of medical professionals, not to get political at the end of the day, but we know that workforce is a huge challenge and will grow to be a bigger challenge. So can you talk about how you're dealing with it today and how you see it in the future?
Oh my God. So the worker that's going to be the biggest challenge is not going to be the doctors or social workers or PTs or OTs. It is that geriatric aide, that home care worker. You just cannot find them anymore. We have completely changed the reimbursement, the payment structure for those. We created a career ladder of 4 steps for them. We think at some point in time that we'll be paying them in the range of $25 an hour just to start. So think about what that means. We have a living wage in California. Well, I shouldn't call it a living wage. It's a higher hourly wage by law. And what it says to somebody who is a home care worker is you can go anywhere now. You can go to Starbucks and make the same amount of money. So you've got to really want to do this kind of work because there's a lot of other easier jobs out there for the same amount of pay. So
I'd like to speak about this because it's really a core value of a Jewish organization to treat employees respectfully. It has to do with, I have learned, it has to do with repairing the world, tikkun olam. They see that those actions with other people that are responsible for the world, treating them with respect. And so we pay a really competitive wage to our frontline caregivers. Their health benefits are really solid because it's part of the mission, it's part of our, it's part of the Jewish tradition. You know, I kind of learned also about the whole kosher thing, really, aside from not getting shrimp in the cafeteria and not putting cheese on your steak, you know, no cheesesteaks. It's also with how humanely the animals are treated when they're slaughtered, and that's how the workers in the factories are treated that make the cheese. And so when you start learning that, you understand that in Jewish organization how employees, respect and honoring people that work with you, really where it comes from. So it's been really kind of an interesting learning curve for me, and retaining staff and having them feel that mission, having them understand why we do what we do is so important. It's just not a job. It's not a paycheck. It's totally they're helping us with our mission. Did I talk too long? Okay.
So what questions should we have asked today that we didn't ask all of you? What did we forget to ask? Or anybody, if anybody else has other questions too.
Economics.
At something specific or?
Yeah, vote. Change the administration.
I said we can't talk politics at the end of
You can't. Can I just? I appreciate that because we live in a time when, I was sitting next to Jennifer and I was opening my cell phone looking at the news and it just made me ill. It is politics. We live in a world where we have to, in order to change what needs to be changed, we have to do something. The Affordable Care Act is now serving literally hundreds of thousands of people, and it could be gone tomorrow. So simple things like that are doing so much good can be overturned so quickly. So I appreciate it. Vote.
Any other best vital ideas for vital living that weren't mentioned today?
I thought it was a very comprehensive day. That was great.
Any questions anyone else has? Oh, I'm going to bring back up because this came up earlier, and I think Val, you touched on it, but David, so working with the congregations that you work with, how do you balance the sisters' right, the individual sisters' right to privacy with leadership's need to know certain things?
Oh wow, it's interesting because when I heard you talking about that, it hasn't been an issue for us. We live in an environment of under HIPAA where we're just very, very cautious about what we can say and who we can say it to. Just because the sisters all live in the same community or congregation, they still all have incredible right to the privacy of their own health conditions and choices and things like that. So we just simply don't share it. Now the team sits together and shares information because they have to create a care plan, which I've now learned is not the right words to use. But other than, but I will actually. But other than that, your privacy is just sacrosanct with us. So.
I know, I just don't have my copy. So in your folders is a closing prayer. While you're getting that out, a couple of things. So Gwen will get you the information of the other resources, and as we were preparing this, some other supplemental things that we thought might be of interest. So she'll send you notification of how to get that information and the link. After the closing prayer, in your folders are also evaluations. So we would really, really, really welcome your input and feedback. Other things you would like to know, what would be helpful, because we know that these questions that are yours are really for, other congregations all over have it, and how do we have the collective sharing? So we welcome any input that you have on the evaluations. And then there's a little gift bag on the way out. And if anyone would like a tour of the Spark Center, so how they redid, it is phenomenal. The other side of the building, like just the other side of the hallway, like if you want to cross the corridor, what we had talked about before, people who didn't cross the corridor. If you want to cross the corridor after this, then they're willing to give anyone who's interested a short tour of the Spark Center. It's definitely worth it. So if we could just take a moment and quiet our minds and open our hearts. And hoping that today was hope-filled, if we could all pray this together. It is often in my experience that the waters do not part until I take the risk of stepping into them. Yet once I take the risk of asking, I have the sense of being undergirded by a power beyond my own. Let me hasten to add that it does not always feel this way in the middle of stepping forward. It can only be in retrospect that I see this commingling of energies, human and divine. Whatever you do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Hope is a dream committed to the discipline of becoming fact. Thank you to all of you, and a huge thank you to Gwen for being the organizer and the incredible amount of work she did to make this happen. Thank you.